Hello, everyone. My name is John Williams, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute of Leadership and Management. And I welcome you to Leadership at the Edge on LinkedIn Live. Join me here where we are sharing ideas across the community of leadership practice in every context, everywhere. Each month, I'm joined by senior leaders from around the world to discuss their real-life experiences, to challenge some outdated leadership practices, and to offer a fresh take on the issues that today's leaders face. In this episode, we'll be discussing the ever fascinating and actually ever challenging topic of collaborative leadership, and I'm privileged to have leading expert Marsha Acker as my guest. Marsha is a professional facilitator and an exec and team coach with 25 years experience supporting leaders as they tackle complex challenges and spearhead change in their organizations. The founder and CEO of TeamCatapult, Marsha uses systems thinking, structural dynamics, dialogue, and agility to help teams collaborate and align with clarity, purpose, and vision. Marsha, welcome.
Thank you, John. It's lovely to be here. Thanks
It's
for having me.
Great to have you with us. Really, really is. Now, collaborative leadership, and we've had a conversation or two about this in the past, and it's quite a profound idea actually, and it's something that almost feels automatic, and yet we know that it's actually something that needs to be done deliberately by leaders. And in an earlier conversation, we talked actually about whether or not leadership has now moved so far towards supporting people, which is good, that it's actually moved away from achieving results. Can we explore that a little bit further, do you think?
Yeah, I love the question, and I in my experience, I think that it's likely very person and team and even organization dependent. And I think there's the conversations that we have in the circles of agility and agile coaching and even executive coaching, where we do spend a lot of time. There's a lot of literature written about people, the emphasis on people. We work with people, not resources. So there's just, I think there's a lot of memes and conversation in that space. But my experience on the ground with leaders and teams is that it's still it's a tension that's still held, right? Of particularly, even, look at the economy right now and a lot of the pressure that's coming forward. And so there's this attention on performance and bottom line, and how do we make that happen? And I think sometimes in that conversation, it can get lost, or it can become, there's a really good intention, there's an intention to collaborate or an intention to focus on people, and then it's sort of like what I intend to do, and then what happens in the moment, becomes a little different. I don't know. That's my experience. But
and it's quite interesting actually, because the way that when we talk to organizations, there's a sort of lag, as you've described it there. My intention is to do this, so I work with the people. I have performance in mind, so I work with my team and I empower them and I support them and I'm compassionate, and actually maybe the performance doesn't come quite quickly enough because of the context, the pressurized context in which we're working. So then we have to start leaning on teams a bit harder. And then, of course, we start to see the rug being pulled from under that compassion and that collaboration and things. And it is a tension. It really is a tension. And it's interesting because maybe one of the I'll say solutions, maybe that's not the right word, to remedying that tension is this idea we talked about once before about patterns. So we all have patterns of behavior, and that feeds into patterns of leadership, the way that we perform leadership roles in situations or generally. And I know you're an acute and experienced observer of patterns of people, of behavior, of leadership. And we often use those patterns as comfort factors. Is there a way in which collaborative leadership could actually benefit from some of the ingrained patterns that we deliver as part of leadership behavior?
Well, first, let me just say, yes, patterns are a big part of how I think about individuals, teams, and organizations. So yes, I think we all have patterns. We use structural dynamics as a way to name the pattern, because it gives us patterns, I think, are made up of both the visible reality, the thing that we can see and observe by communication and behavior in the moment, in the room, but that there's also such a deep invisible reality that I think that sits behind our patterns and what we do, why we do what we do, why we repeat that pattern over and over again. I often think about, for me, sort of the yellow flag for leaders is, where do you have conversations, the same conversation over and over again? Because I think that's a really good indicator of, like, you can catch sight of that because you'll have a moment of like, wait a minute, did we just talk about this 2 weeks ago and we're back having the same conversation? And, what about what I said then wasn't understood or isn't quite received, and so I thought we decided, but now we're back talking about it again. So I think if you ever find yourself in those moments where you're having those repeated conversations, it's a good indicator that you've likely stumbled across a pattern. And then to your question of, is it a helpful pattern or an unhelpful pattern, and I think there's ways to make sense of that. Is that pattern moving you forward? Then great. If it's not, and you find yourself living sort of Groundhog Day moments, like I've been here before, chances are it's not. And I focus on helping people be able to name those patterns in the moment, and then decide collectively, so is this helping us or is this holding us back? And then what's my part in this? So just to make it a bit more concrete, if I really value open collaboration and sort of hearing all voices, but I notice that we're running up on time, or we need to move things along, and I need to make a decision, or someone needs to make a decision, then at some point, it's time to close down the open conversation and move along to what's the decision and who's going to make it. And I can run across someone who maybe doesn't want to shut the conversation down, wants to continue, or hasn't had a chance to say things. And so we could find ourselves, navigating this pattern where I'm trying to close it and someone else is still trying to keep it open. And then it's not really helpful. So can we both name, like we've got a difference here. One of us is wanting to, stay in collaboration. Another one is wanting to move it along. And for lots of reasons. And there will always be both visible and then invisible reasons why I'm doing that, right? I'll have some story that says, if I shut it down, then this might happen. This is a risk, right? And actually, both people in the conversation will be having their own story about that. So it's like, that's part of that invisible reality that I think influences our patterns always.
That's really interesting, because that invisible reality that you talk about, we all have, well, I suppose I certainly have a consciousness about some of our patterns, and certainly that, I've been through this conversation before, happens with all of us in the leadership sense and stuff like that. But I suppose it's almost impossible for us to be conscious of those invisible patterns because they're subconscious to us. Do you think, and this is thinking about agility, because there are patterns in the way that agility can be effectively applied. Do you think that actually agility is one source of remedy for those invisible patterns? Getting conscious about, let's be agile about this.
I actually think that it's the flip. I think that the desire, I love the question, but I think it's the desire for agility, the ability to respond to what's happening, that actually has to start in us, like as leaders in our leadership, to be more aware of those invisible patterns that actually get in our way of the thing that we say we want. We say we want collaboration, we say we want agility, and there's so many, there's so much research, right, around the State of the Agile report that, the behavior of leaders is the thing that challenges. I think even HBR, a couple of times has named, it's not, agility has changed a lot, but it stands to be kind of capped because of behavior. So I think in my opinion, what's holding us back from that is our individual behavior, individual and collective behaviors that kind of get in our way of like we say we want something, but then we haven't done the inner work to find like what it would mean for me, or even what would be at risk. Like where might I have an invisible pattern,
Yep.
an invisible reality, my own invisible reality that holds me back from even wanting to be agile, even though I think I do. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it does, and it's very interesting actually, because the it flags up the need to question ourselves,
mm,
which is, you know, a self-awareness, which is always a positive, I guess, in people, and it also, though, because it's also, we're going to question ourselves. We need to be quite courageous about how
mm,
we do that. And we have to dig quite deep and be prepared to go a long way in questioning
yeah,
ourselves and our patterns and motivations. And I know we've talked before about the need for courage
yeah.
in leadership. Do you think, therefore, that courage is almost automatically a useful or important element in a collaborative leadership context?
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
I,
Yeah.
I, I mean, I think I believe it. I think I believe that, that
Mhm.
courage is important. I think for all of us. And then I'm fresh off of being actually the first time I've been in a room with a team in over almost 3 years.
Right.
But,
Mhm.
just back from a week of being in the room with a team, and boy, did I witness it. The the actually courage and
Mhm.
vulnerability from every leader in that room, and then the impact it had on their ability to move something forward that had,
Right.
that was stuck. So I think I'd almost say that it's not. I don't know that it's possible to move
Mhm.
forward unless there's courage, because I think, as you said, it's about where, what part of it are you, do you dare to look at yourself?
Mhm.
Like, can you
Mhm.
look at the aspect? And it's not just looking at ourselves, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
that I work with some leaders who actually overdo it. They swing the pendulum a little too far on that
Mhm.
spectrum and take it all on. So that's not the
Right.
thing either, right? Like I'm the problem, I'm the fault, I'm the
Yeah.
reason.
Mhm.
And that's a little too much into that side. But I think there's
Yeah.
always a part that we're playing, each of us individually,
Mhm.
in what we're getting. And so are we willing to take a look at both ourselves and the part we're playing, and then also the whole of
Yep.
the system, and what's someone else's part too?
I really like that, because just this morning, actually, I was talking to a group, and I said to them, one of the things that is quite a common statement that we use with ourselves is, it's not my fault.
Mm,
Okay, I know I'm the leader of this team, and however, things didn't work out because of the context or
yeah.
the situation in this moment, or so and so didn't do the thing right. It's not my fault. And of course,
Mm,
we cannot accept that of ourselves if we're going to be in a leadership position. We have
yeah.
to accept that some of it is not our
Mm,
fault. We are responsible for it. At
yeah.
the same time, as you said, we can't go to the other extreme and say it's all my fault,
Right. Right.
because that's actually as dysfunctional as
Yeah.
the rest. And actually, in a way, do you think that precludes other people
Mm.
from the ability to be courageous? And
Sure.
yeah.
Right? Because if I'm on a team, if I'm a team member and
Mm,
there's somebody on my team who always takes all the responsibility. I mean,
mm,
let's be honest. I mean, I'll speak for myself.
mm.
I absolutely hate to fail or create a kerfluffle or
Yeah.
have an impact on someone that I is not what I intended, and to
Mhm.
get feedback that what I did caused hurt or pain or
Yeah.
harm, or
Yep.
I screwed something up, and
Mhm.
now we're going to be missing out on something. And so
Yep.
nobody likes that.
Mhm.
I don't roll out of bed in the
Yeah.
morning and go, oh, what am I going to learn about myself today that I don't like? So I think that it's easy to, if there's someone who's going to, be the holder of all, team ills, then it
Mhm.
would be really easy for the team to sort of fall into, yeah, you can have that, you're,
Mhm.
so yeah, I do think we rob people of their own experience when we do that.
Yeah, I love that phrase. What am I going to learn about myself today that I don't like? I think that's absolutely great. And you're right. It's the last thing that what are we thinking when we climb out of bed in the morning. I mean, it's there. Just thinking about the collaborative leadership generally, I guess.
Mm,
Really, do you think there's a time when we actually wouldn't want to see or experience collaborative leadership?
mm. Yeah, I love that question because it's certainly, if I think about my definition of collaborative leadership is involving others and hearing all voices, and for anybody who knows me will know that that's certainly I think I say it's often it's in my DNA. It is definitely how I'm oriented. But one of the things, so in structural dynamics, there are actually 3 operating systems. One is open system, so hearing all voices. Another is closed systems, so that's, plans, processes, hierarchy. And then there's a random system of innovation and creativity. And so it's those 3 systems. And so I think about it, the way I think about it today is I think that whether you would call yourself a collaborative leader or whatever other, moniker you'd give yourself as a leader, I think that our job as leaders, like I think the work to do is to have range in our leadership. So my task often is, because I'm so oriented to collaboration, I'm so oriented to wanting to hear what people think and wanting to have all voices in the space. And that has certainly served me. I find that I work a lot with teams who do that less. I'm all about, giving people facilitation skills that help that. So all that's true. And there is a time and a place for it. And so there are times when it makes much more sense that we've got to put it into a process. And actually, we don't need to ask everybody what they think. We just need somebody to make a decision. And I think one of the things that trips us up in the Agile community is we give that a label of like command and control, which has its own definition for me. I think command and control comes a lot more from unhelpful behavior or just trying to, squash and command things. But we're, as Agilists, I think sometimes we're allergic to somebody stepping forward and closing something down and making a decision. And I think there can be really helpful ways in which that happens that actually adds clarity and certainty to the extent that you can create any kind of certainty today. But I think it adds clarity to what's happening, and it can be the thing that moves a team forward. So I think it's about finding the right balance for the thing or the task at hand.
Right. Yeah. Now that's interesting, because if we think about emergency teams, for example, whether they're military or fire or police or ambulance or whatever it is, they have protocols for emergency situations. And one of the things I like about that idea is, first of all, it allows us to be, in a sense, fixed in terms of the outcome we want, and flexible and context sensitive in terms of what the individuals actually do at the time. However, the protocol gives them guidance. And the thing I guess that's important about that, and it reminds me of quite a lot of the materials around agility, the guidance in the protocol for an emergency situation is built on data. So people have been through lots and lots of these emergency situations and said, if this, then that. So they create this ever-growing database of this is what we should do in these situations. And it's interesting that agility also is, in a sense, is based around data and feedback from the situation. Do you think that becomes, I'm thinking about the situation we are in now, economically and socially and politically all around the world and stuff like that. Do you think, I was going to say, do you think collaborative leadership would be useful? But that's like saying, do we want it to rain to make the grass grow? I guess, really. Do you think are there signs of collaborative leadership in some of the challenges that we face?
Yeah, I think, so one thing for me is I would define collaborative leadership of an aspect of collaborative leadership that would be important for me is, where do we create space? And I would say even, where do we slow down to create space, particularly as an organization, a team, leadership team, to be in dialogue about really complex, challenging topics that don't have easy answers. So as you tee up the concept of the economy and what's happening. And I don't think there's an organization out there that isn't either, experiencing some impact, or, you and I were talking just briefly a little while ago, but or has their eye on what's coming and what's going to happen,
Yep.
and then how do we respond? And how do
Yep.
we respond rather than react? And there might be some things that have to be a bit more reactive because your closed system process,
Yep.
is blown out of the water. Like this
Yep.
is unprecedented, and so we have to do something different. But I think, in terms to your question about how does the current state or the current context impact what kind of leadership we need, I think it's when we need more space for, like, slowing it down long enough. What I mean about slowing it down is, in my experience, particularly a lot of leadership teams are go, go, go. They just, from
Yes.
one thing to the next
Yep.
to the next, and it is
Yep.
a constant just get it done, make the decision, move on, gather 3 people, talk about what you need to talk about, and then move on.
Yep.
And I think there are places to sort of strategically take a pause and come back to, okay, so we're gonna take a couple of hours and slow, I call it slow your roll, and just settle into a dialogue, a conversation about what are we all seeing, what, enough so that we could hear different perspectives, hear different points of view, and to actually maybe learn something from the conversation that would give us new data so that we could go try a new experiment. And I think in that way, that kind of collaborative leadership would be invaluable right now. But I think it's one of those things that's hard for people to do because they're running down the road.
Yeah, because we've got all of this pressures behind us, like perform. I remember people often ask, I'm sure they ask you as well, what's the best piece of advice you ever had in business and stuff like this. I don't remember because I've had so much good advice from other people, but I remember the worst piece of advice I ever had, which was hurry up. And it's stuck in my head, and I spent years hurrying up, got to keep going. And you're absolutely right. The idea of, especially in, I suppose I can still call it a VUCA context, because it is now, really. There's massive complexity and everything else around us. If we want to answer the question, what does next look like? Then actually, amidst complexity, we have to take time to step out and think about it. Interesting. Okay.
John, I love, can I just double click on something, because I love the phrase, as you name, just hurry up. I think that's it's a helpful phrase to catch sight of. And I think for all of us, we'll have our own phrases. And so as leaders, if you can find the phrase that's running through your mind, that's sitting behind your behavior, then can you find a replacement for it? Can you find a new phrase, right? So you said it just at the very end there was like your tone of voice changed, and you said, can we just slow down? And so, like, every time you find yourself going, can we just hurry up? Then you can catch yourself and go, actually, I often use the phrase, go slow to go fast. So that's what helps me slow my pace. Like, what I know and believe from experience is that to actually carve out the time and go a little bit slower is how we go faster later on. But anyway, so I think finding those phrases, which we all will have, and writing a new one.
I think that's great. And because I remember when somebody actually did give me a piece of advice, he said, well, whenever somebody says to you, can you do this, John? Can you do this, John? Because I was still in hurry up mode, of course, at the time. And he said, whenever somebody says that to you, just say, let me think about it. And then think about it.
Yeah. And then actually think about it.
Yeah. And I thought that's what makes the difference, really. Because I can say, let me think about it. Okay, yes. But actually thinking about it. And again, I think if we're going to engage in collaborative leadership, on the one hand, I guess we need to do that more often. And secondly, I guess it's actually, am I right in thinking it's easier to do in a collaborative leadership context because we have other influences from people who will help us with those good patterns, if we like? Does it work that way, do you think?
Yeah, I think it absolutely works to have people around you that share the same nomenclature and share the same value around hearing all voices and working together sort it out. So yeah, I think that's really supportive. It's certainly like you find yourself not arguing or debating the finer points of like how, but then we can focus on the topic and the content and have differences there.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Now we're coming to the end quite soon, and there's a sort of inevitability about the top tip question, isn't there? Really, this is sort of, at the end of every session we always have to have this, and I know that you've got so many top tips in your head. I know that there are grillions of them, but are there just a couple of ideas or suggestions that you would make to leaders and managers about who want to create a collaborative leadership context in their organization? What are a couple of things that you would say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's no better time than now would be one. I think finding a way to slow your roll and to create space for conversation. I think we actually undervalue and deprioritize conversation so much. And I see it happen even as we're training facilitators to, run an exercise and do a process. All of that, in my view, what's the most important thing that should rise to the top of any facilitated process or any leadership meeting or team meeting is like, are we talking about the things that we need to talk about in the conversation?
Right.
Are we bringing the whole conversation into the room? Or, do I, as a leader, leave that conversation and I only say 10 or 15% of what I really think, and then I wait till I leave and I call my friend or I get on the Slack channel and say what I really think. And so, like, I think my top tip would be to, challenge yourself. Are you bringing the full conversation in the room? Are you saying what you really think? And are you also creating the conditions for others to do the same? And so, that will be, if you hold some hierarchy or rank in a team, it will be, are you going first? Are you modeling what it looks like? Are you inviting it from others? How do you react? What do you do with that when people bring it? Like, do you shut them down or do you change the subject? All of that will be indicators of what you really think about it. So I think it's just, are you bringing the conversation in the room?
Amazing. Marsha, thank you so much. There have been a whole bunch of comments, which is really, really nice, and which have been very supportive of the things that you've been saying. And unsurprisingly, I think, for me, I take away the things I take away from this are particularly the point that you made just last of all there about the whole conversation and the need to recognize our patterns and to utilize them where useful, to be courageous enough to bring the whole conversation and have that whole conversation there. And then actually just to do it slowly. Yeah, not to be in a hurry. Well, Marsha, I'm absolutely delighted with the conversation. Thank you so much indeed. And I know that the conversation, the comments have been very positive, and I'm really, really pleased about that. We will definitely need to talk about this again, because I think this one goes on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody, that's it really. Thank you very much indeed, Marsha, for joining us today.
Thanks,
really, it's my special thanks to you. And I think as founder and CEO of TeamCatapult, I think you're doing a great job. Absolutely. And my thanks also to you, the audience, for listening and the comments and questions that you've raised. Now, do please join the conversation on social media using the hashtag #LeadershipAtTheEdge. And for more of our events and lots of other content, visit our website at www.institutelm.com. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you.